Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this replay of a new live stream all about the importance of practice for memory improvement, the importance of practice for how and why and when and what you should be doing to make sure that you're getting sufficient practice in your memory palace work and your memory training work, because consistency is the key. It's one of the number one things that makes the difference, and it is the only thing that makes the difference at the end of the day. So we're going to go into that deep. If you're joining us live, then hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. And if you are watching the replay, hit the thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, get subscribed so that you will not miss any future broadcasts. And make sure you hit that bell icon so you get an email. And I'm looking now, and it looks like the email is out. So, you know, these things always sort of begin with a little bit of preamble while we're waiting for people to show up on the live stream, and testing to make sure everybody can hear. And so, well, let's see. What really is inspired this is I'm rereading Happiness Beyond Thought by Gary Weber, and absolutely love this book, and it's well worth going through. And he talks about practice in here, and practice in terms of meditation and the kind of work that would lead one towards enlightenment, but the same principles apply to memory practice and memory practice in a memory palace. So that is very, very important to consider in your work is, are you getting a sufficient number and amount of practice? So if you're joining us, let me know in the chat where you are in the world. Hit that thumbs up button, and we would love to be interactive on these sessions, because that's what makes them fun. When you have your questions, you can post questions you may have about memory practice, memory palace practice, and improvement, or other questions that you may have related to the topic of memory at large. And one of the reasons that this book is so powerful is because it sent me on a journey that has improved my memory a great deal, even though I got a little bit worried at the beginning. I was like, oh, I'm trying to escape the ego. What on earth am I doing with going and using these memory techniques to create crazy images based out of my past? Wouldn't that lock me into my ego? But it turns out that it's actually even more freeing than the worry was justified. But you know, the mind just carries on and carries on. So really excited to talk about some of the tips in terms of practice that I just read through in Happiness Beyond Thought, and I highly encourage that you get this book if you don't have it already. Let me know in the chat that you're able to hear. Sometimes the sound is not loud enough on these, and let me know where you are in the world and how you're doing. Crone Woman says, hello teacher. Hello Crone Woman Walking. I love that name. Thanks for taking a moment there to post in the chat, and great to see you. So yeah, the passage really that struck me is in, well, actually the whole book strikes me, so I highly recommend reading it. But there's a whole section here, the case for practice in awakening, and it all applies so directly to your memory training, because the case for practice has to be made. I don't think people fully understand that really what they're looking at is something that you can get really good at really quickly if you will practice in particular ways. And there are different kinds of practice that different kinds of people are going to need. But one thing is very, very clear, is that we all need practice, and memory improvement is a practice. It's not a sort of set it and forget it thing, even though you think it would be because it's memory practice, but it's something you take on as a way of life. The same way that meditation is a way of life. And one of the first things you'll learn in meditation is that the journey never ends. You always got to be polishing that mind, and meditation is a great way of doing it. And it's really, really important that you show up, and you really want to do it every day. So, you know, there's nothing really at the end of the day that happens every day for all people, although you can get really, really close. And so I show up and do some kind of memory work virtually every day, and it is just part of keeping the tools oiled and the mind polished. And the great thing is that memory work, memory training, being in memory palaces is very close, if not a form of meditation. And so you get the benefits of both. But meditation is not necessarily a form of memory training, even though we see in the science that there is memory benefits from that. But I would highly encourage anybody to see the two together. So Crone Woman says she can hear me. YouTube feed is slow because she's in hospital. Oh, sorry to hear about that. I mean, maybe you're visiting, but for whatever reason you're there, unless it's for work, hope everything is okay and that you get better. And you say that you practiced during an Alzheimer Association charity walk. I remember names and also two major landmarks. Awesome. That's amazing. Really great. So if you're joining us, thumbs up to Crone Woman Walking for walking during that event and being part of charity for this issue, because it is a very, very serious one that we all need to be aware of. And I've certainly written about it on the Magnetic Memory Method site. And there's a podcast about Alzheimer's, and there's more coming on that front because it's really, really important. And so thumbs up to you for that. Really, really great. Now, in this section here on the case for practicing and the case for practice in awakening, it's really very, very important because it talks to the issue of emulating teachers and how that so many people are so different and need different things. And so he says, insisting that you follow precisely the path that worked for your teacher is guaranteed to be inadequate in some way. Any student, no matter how diligent and well prepared, is going to be different from the teacher in conditioning, experience, age, genetics, family history, bodily and mental capability, etc. How could something as complex and comprehensive as awakening not be a personally tailored process? And so that's really, really a good point and a solid one, and it's why I've always talked about the magnetic memory method as a method, not a system, because I already know this truth, is that it's not going to be that you can ever adopt someone else's system, but rather you need to create your own, and you need to know the methods and the practices behind it, which is what this book is about, is letting you understand the practices and methods behind awakening. And I want you to be awake to your memory. So one of the things that you need to think about is your age, and how your health is, and what your sleep is like, and all these sorts of things. But ultimately, your memory practice, I strongly see all the evidence in the world for, both scientifically and practically, has to do with your goals, your outcome, what you actually want to achieve. And so the practices that you will do need to have some focus on what it is you want to achieve. So if it's speed, if it's length of retention, if it's volume of information, or it's a combination of all those things, then a combination of all those things for what specifically? Is it for cards? Is it for foreign language vocabulary? What is it for? You want to think about those things, and then you can build the practice routines that will help you achieve those outcomes and those goals. And more importantly, you can pick the right techniques that are going to get there. Now, the right technique is always the memory palace. There's no getting around that. And one of the reasons why is that all memory is spatial in nature in one way or another. So you might as well start with the foundational technique, master that, and then use all the other ones inside of this. So Daryl Kidd is here, says hello. Hello, Daryl Kidd. Thanks for saying hello. Ravi Teja says, hi, sir. How are you? Always Anthony, never sir. Thank you for saying hello. Ravi Teja. Fury Sakes. Oh, I like that one. Fury Sakes says, hi, hello, hello. Thanks for saying hello. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. And I love to know where you are in the world, because that helps me build my geopolitical aesthetic memory map inside of my head. But is that making sense to everybody? Insisting that you follow precisely the path that worked for your teacher is guaranteed to be inadequate in some way. Now, notice that word precisely. That doesn't mean you don't follow the path of your teacher, but the fantasy, hoping, wishing, and praying that it'll play out exactly as it did for your teacher, precisely, that's a trap. That's a trap. So I don't want to throw this quote out here from this book and not have that word precisely be noticed, because that's the word. You can follow in the footsteps of teachers. You can follow in the footsteps of role models. You can, and how can you not? I mean, many people have stood on the shoulders of giants. That's just how you get to see as far as it is possible to see. And I myself do that. I just was speaking with Nelson Dulles for an episode of the podcast and a graduation bonus for the masterclass students. And, he's got his climb for memory and his mountain climbing stuff, and I really have been so deeply inspired by that. And he shared something with the masterclass students that is really, really powerful in terms of really making sure that you can see as far as you need to see, but not in a way that you're overstepping your reach. And it really helped me. So I'm like learning from him, but there's no way I'm ever going to emulate precisely what he did in order to achieve his accomplishments. And there's no need to, because I don't want to win memory championships. I don't want to even compete. I just have my goals. So one of my goals is when I read a book like this is to memorize terms that come up. So there was one in particular that I really resonated with, which is, I think it's on page 5. Shakantaza. Shakantaza. Let's see here. Was it page 5? Oh yeah, there we go. So Shakan Taza, yeah, right, exactly. Maybe it's Shikan Taza or something like this. I've never heard it pronounced, but it's really interesting because it means to hit. So to sit to hit, right? And I always heard from Alan Watts, sit just to sit, but here it's sit to hit or something like this. And basically, he goes on to repeat something that I've often said in a different form, which I heard in a movie called Ghost Dog by Jim Jarmusch. If you've never seen that movie, it's great, but it always has this quote about how you have to be like the samurai and prepared to execute one last move, even with your head cut off. And this shikantaza, or shikantaza, however it might be pronounced, it has this exact same sentiment here. It starts on page 5, and on page 6 it continues. The metaphor is of a swordsman engaged in a fight with a skilled opponent, something for which Zen training was widely used in ancient Japan. There can be nothing in his mind, for if he was distracted even for a second, he would be killed. He must be ready to strike or deflect an attack at any time. Thinking about his next meal, a geisha, which awaits the victor, or the prize or honor he might receive, will likely be his demise. This is the level of attention required for this sitting meditation, shikantaza, just sitting with an empty mind but with complete and heightened awareness. And it's similar with memory. So this morning I was memorizing some cards, and it was after memorizing a quote, because I have started to memorize some passages from Stillness Speaks by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know why, I just suddenly this morning felt called to start memorizing this. And then I squeezed in some cards, and I only got through 4 cards. And then my wife woke up and she was, saying, Hendu Among, she always says, which means that she had lots of dreams in Chinese. Then I ask her what she remembers of them, and that's how our day usually begins. But I only got in 4 cards. But in order to make sure that I memorized them correctly, and I just memorized some direct verbatim quotes from Stillness Speaks, I had to be really fully attentive to not having that disrupted, because then, you need to actually go through this material in your mind in order to get it. And then I went and I tested after I went and had a shower, and I came out and I tested, and there was one little clause in the quote that I missed. And other than that, I had 100%. Not only the quote, but these 4 cards. And I was just able to squeeze in the 4 cards, and I knew that I wanted to just get up and talk to my wife and not be sitting there with my memory practice. But the point is I still got in the memory practice, even if it was just 4 cards and this bit of verbatim, and scored really, really well. And probably 10, 15 minutes went past before I did the test, and to get 98% on that was just like, yes. And now the beautiful thing is that little blip, this little clause that I missed, is now going to be much more memorable, precisely because I did miss it in the recall. And as I was pointing out to my wife when I did it, I was just like, yeah, you know what? You don't even really need that clause in there. But in any case, I better remember it, because the goal on this one is 100% accuracy with the verbatim. So it's really, really important. Let's check in with our chat here. Johnny72187 asks, what is the book about? Happiness Beyond Thought is a practical guide to awakening, which means it is about bringing yourself to a state where you are no longer troubled by worry, concern, or thoughts that impede your conscious state, and you essentially escape the traps of the ego, of the self, and you experience this happiness beyond thought. Now, happiness, whatever that means, is a complicated word. I often think of eudaimonia or eudaimonia, however it may be pronounced. It's pronounced differently by different people, which is ancient Greek for happiness, but it more or less means flourishing. Anyway, I was very skeptical of this book when I first heard about it, Happiness Beyond Thought. And a friend of mine, Ben Fischel, who has a site called Project Monkey Mind, he said, no, you got to try this. And the thesis of the book is that if you just practice particular things, you could accelerate the reduction of thought, if not completely eliminate thought. And so I haven't completely eliminated thought, but I've discovered a lot about thought as a result, and been able to discover a lot of inner stillness. And one of the things that was really, really interesting about it is that it helped my memory a great deal, in addition to creating some very wonderful feelings of bliss and contentment and a lack of worry and concern. Certainly a huge reduction of it. Now, every once in a while, there are these blips and spikes of it that come back. But now there are tools to help with that. And one of those tools is the first passage of Stillness Speaks, which says that when you lose touch with the self, when you lose touch with inner stillness, you lose touch with the self. And when you lose touch with the self, you lose yourself in the world. Then it goes on to say the innermost sense of self is inseparable from stillness. It is the I am. The innermost sense of self, who you really are, is inseparable from stillness. It is the I am that is deeper than name and form. I think I got that right. Let's have a look here. Woo! On the spot, memorization, recall. I haven't totally encoded it, but that should be pretty good. When you lose touch with inner stillness, you lose touch with yourself. When you lose touch with yourself, you lose yourself in the world. Your innermost sense of self, of who you are, is inseparable from stillness. This is the I am that is deeper than name and form. Not bad, not bad. I have to go back and watch that, but to see how accurate that was. But it was quite good. And so I don't know why. I just felt called to memorize something from this book this morning, and so far so good. Might need to sharpen up a few things, but this is memory practice. I do something like this virtually every day. There's rarely a day that I miss. And what I really liked about today was being able to do that and some cards. And the cards that I remember, the deck is over there actually, so we could check. It was 9 of spades, Queen of hearts, then it was 8 of clubs and Queen of diamonds. And the images for that were Tipper Gore. You know Tipper Gore, remember her? With her tape that is from the censorship tape, and she's wrapping it around the monkey from Space Odyssey. And then Liv Schreiber is there, and he's biting the neck of what did I say was the last one? Queen of diamonds, of a samurai. So all that leads to, let me see if I got that. Really excited. I love memory training. I didn't reshuffle the deck, but what did I say? I said 9 of spades, and then I said Queen of hearts, and then I said 8 of clubs, and then I said Queen of diamonds. Now, I only got in those 4 cards before my wife woke up with her hen duo meng. Cao shang hao, hen duo meng. But then I got in there, and I got it right. So it's really exciting to be doing this all the time. But this is training. And the whole point here is that you've got to show up consistently. And that's what we're reminded of in this book, in this chapter of The Case for Practice in Awakening. And he goes on, once you get past the idea that you can precisely imitate your teacher, and you have this understanding of, what you're going to do and why you're going to do it and how you're going to do it, he talks about musical training and how that MRI studies on violinists have shown that the brain regions that control fingering movements grow in size. Longer and more intensive practices produces bigger changes. And I think that's why, I was speaking with so many memory experts recently and memory champions. It's why sometimes when you're practicing with cards, maybe, I don't know exactly why, but it's a mystery that we all have experienced, is sometimes you'll just see the last couple cards in a row, but you actually won't have a conscious experience of encoding them, but you'll still get them back anyway, right? And I think that even when I have a day like today when I don't know exactly when my wife is going to get up. My morning ritual is always to get up and do some memorization, and ideally it's before she gets up and I get in more cards than that. But I just get in what I get in. But because I show up all the time, like I get stronger and stronger at it, and it's probably because brain structures are actually changing. In fact, it's the only plausible sort of explanation here, really. Um, let's see, check in with our chats here. So Fury Sakes lives in Leeds, England. Thanks for letting me know that, Fury Sakes. Daryl's in Georgia, United States. If you're just joining us, let me know where you are in the world and how you're doing, how you're feeling, what's going on with your memory and your memory training. Uh, Julie's here from California. Hello, Julie. I got a different Batman cup this morning, but thank you for yours. Batman cups just keep keep showing up, which is fun. Thank you. Bunami says, "Hello, Anthony. Remember me? Would you be interested in being a mentor for memory palaces?" Yeah, like I said, Bunami, thank you for thinking of me. Get in touch through the proper channels. That's certainly a great and honored request. But there are ways to do that through email, best, most efficient. And I am, of course, mentoring memory palaces right now. So thanks for being here and thanks for saying hello. Johnny says, "Think less equals awakening." Well, that's the question. I mean, I just highly recommend that you go to Amazon and get this book right now to help you answer that question for yourself. But it's almost a question of, are you thinking less, or what kind of thoughts are you having, right? And free will is an interesting concept here, a difficult one, a troubling one. But you want to think a little bit about where you could possibly intervene on the thoughts that you're having and how that you're having them. Um, and it's really, really important that you take a stab at it. And one of the ways that you do that is through study and practice. And it will change your brain, but you need to be consistent enough about it to change the actual shapes of your brain. And it's kind of like grooves in a record. If you're doing really good behaviors, then those behaviors will create habits. And speaking of that, we've recorded an interesting interview with James Clear recently, and we're just working on an infographic now. And he shared with us the ways to establish a habit. And there's one, two, three, four, five. And the infographic's looking really great. I'm looking at it now. So this is not from memory, but just looking at this infographic that we came up with. And so start with a small habit. So start with something small. And I think anybody could come up with a memory goal, whether it's cards, some foreign language vocabulary, or whatever it is, but just start with something small. And James Clear says if you choose a habit that's very small and it accumulates with a bunch of other small changes to form a larger system, then you can end up with a very remarkable result or immensely powerful outcome. And then organize your thoughts, he suggests, and habits are easier to do when you approach it in an organized manner. This is what we try to teach at Magnetic Memory Method, is to organize your mind with a memory palace so that when you sit down to memorize, you can do it in an organized manner. What I just recited from these cards, even if it's just 4 this morning, the reason that it works is because it's an organized practice. This quote that I was able to do here, from here, it's an organized practice because here in I got so many books here. I need to become an octopus in my next life because I have so many objects here. But the organization is simple. I wanted to memorize this, so I started with the Memory Palace. In Australia, these books always get so dirty, but in any case, the Metro Reference Library in Toronto became the one, and I just started to encode. And it's because of the organization that the habit falls into place. So thank you to James Clear for that point. Organization is the key to success with your habits, for sure. And one of the cool things about what you'll learn in this book and its sequel, which is called, I don't have it here, but it's called Evolving Beyond Thought, is that you can use self-inquiry questions that you memorize and practice in a very organized manner. And the Sanskrit, when you memorize the Sanskrit, it's cool because they're in these segments. And what ends up happening is they link together. And there's almost like this feeling of logic to them and how they sound. It's really cool. Anyway, the third one from James Clear here is to put your ideas into practice. A habit must be established before it can be improved. and then be consistent. If you're committed into mastering your habits, you'll see a drastic change in saving time. Try things until something comes easily, and then find your tribe. That's what we're doing here right now. We have this tribe going on. And he says, finding your tribe where you can form friendship and belonging will build habits more easier. I think we got to clean that grammar up a bit there, but in any case, with greater ease. And it's really great. We had this wonderful interview, and then Liz, who's doing some help now with the magnetic memory method, she put together some show notes for the podcast and this infographic, and wow, just looking great. So I can't wait to get that out for you. But it's not going to be released until October because of the initiative that James Clear has with his new book, which is called Atomic Habits, and really highly recommend that as well. Now, what's cool in this... Oh, let's check in with the chat here before we carry on. So... Funami says you can direct message me as I suggested by email. That would be great. Sandra's here from Northern California with the waves. Excellent. Glad the waves brought you in our direction. That's really wonderful. Great to see you always, Sandra. Julie says nicely memorized. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I mean it's always a fun thing to do it live, and it's something we may in the future be able to all do together. So stay tuned for news about that. Robert is here. Says Gary Weber lives in town here. I think he's a friend of a friend. Good book. Got it at home somewhere. Wow, that's amazing. Cool. Nice. Well, that's such a small world. Tell him I said hello. I was chatting on one of his recent video threads recently, and it's always nice to see new videos from him, and apparently some new ones are coming out. There's some relatively new ones. Definitely get on his channel. Fury6 says, do you know how many Loki you have in total? I have 0 Loki because I don't use that terminology. I have magnetic stations in memory palaces. Nelson Dellis and I, when we recorded some stuff yesterday, he didn't know how many memory palaces he has either. He's like, well, it's between 50 and 100. And I'm like, well over 300 now, but I don't count them, and there's no need to. And how many magnetic stations all combined inside of there? It's an unknown number, and it's not necessary to know. However, that said, there is a way to know if you wanted to. I don't think it's practical. You can listen to an interview I have with Brad Zupp. He's more organized in that manner for his goals. Speaking of practice and goals. So definitely search magneticmemorymethod.com and Brad Zupp. Actually, why don't I do the... I look so much like Jesus, I might as well do the Jesus thing. I will serve you and make sure that you have the right link here in the chat, because everybody needs to hear this this particular episode, because it's very good to hear how he organizes his memory palaces. And I've thought since that time and done some work to sort of adapt my own approach from that, and it's working really good. It's going to come out in a new training eventually, but bear with me here while I find that link for you, because I want to make sure you find the right one, and Google search is so... My keyboard is just not working quite right. I'm going to have to plug in a different keyboard in order to make that work. Oh, I don't know why they have to do all this wireless stuff, because then the batteries fade and it doesn't work, and now my keyboard, the battery keyboard, is typing stuff from about 5 hours ago. Replay people, I apologize for your replay inconvenience here, and live people, I apologize for your inconvenience as well. But I want to make sure that you get that right link. And I'm reaching here. Oh, my face is in the camera. Reaching for the plug-in so I can type properly, because battery running out keyboards are not cool. By the way, oh no, this thing's too dirty. This is dirtier than my notebook. I don't know why things get so dirty and sweaty in Australia. It must be the sun. But anyway, there's my special keyboard. Weird keyboard. So, let's see here. The world is such a weird thing. Let's see here now if I can find this for you and type it properly, because it's not the one that's under his name. It's the second interview we did. Magnetic Memory Method, Brad Zupp, passwords. It's Passwords Manager, and just for your convenience, you can check that out. Now, I don't know if Brad would also know his total either. Not, but I know he's very much more organized than some of us. So let's see if I can get this for you in the chat. I think I'm the only one who's allowed to. Oh, why is that not copying and pasting? But yeah, you got to hear what he has to say, because he's just genius with his organization there. And again, the point is, it's for a particular outcome that he had, and it is very, very important that our outcomes be linked with our practice, and our practice with our outcomes, because that's where we get chaos. That's where we have a lack of organization, and we don't get the same results when we're not organized. So check that out, and you can think more through that episode about the value and when you might want to have your stations totally numbered and known, and memory palaces and so forth, because that is a definitely something you might want to have for certain goals like Brad's. And if you don't know Brad's goal, oh man, it's inspiring. Check it out. All right, so Sandra says, could you comment on verbatim memorization, please? I have trouble with syntax. How were you recalling the phrases you added as you rebuilt the quote? Okay, so I only encoded that this morning, and basically what I did is I used the Metro reference library in Toronto. And this is interesting, right? Because I couldn't even remember if it has 8 floors or 5, but I finally think it's got 5, and I settled on 5. So sorry, Metro reference library, if I remembered you incorrectly. But I basically decided this is a wonderful, wonderful memory palace to use, because if you've ever seen it, it looks like T-bone steak. And it's these slabs. I'm trying to think. There's a movie, I think it's called Red, with Bruce Willis and Helen Mirren. They have a scene in the Metro reference library. Anyway, what I did is I figured out the path following the magnetic memory method principles, and then I just started. And so one of the things is that the images, they don't need to be verbatim. They need to be keyword based, and also verbatim to the extent that's necessary. And then if you leave some white space, so to speak, if you leave some breathing room, logic itself, your understanding of grammar itself, will help fill in the blanks. And then there's a that in here, which I would tend in my speech to probably prefer which, but it is that in this particular thing. So then that might need some extra care, right? And this little clause that was hanging there, then I have to decide, okay, so do I want to be bulletproof with this, or do I want to memorize it the way I like it? So verbatim, you have to decide what is your outcome. And in this case, I'm going to work on 100%, because that would be my goal with this, is to memorize these phrases 100%. And basically, it's just going to come down to practice and familiarity with the technique. It may be that there's some overstuffing in my strategy here. So for example, the second passage of the first passage, or the second paragraph of the first passage, when it says, this is so interesting, to continue being entertaining and educating, and pause and visit a memory palace and think about what it was. But the innermost self, right? So Inner Space is a movie. What's the name of that actor? Martin Short is in it. So I got like the movie poster of Inner Space there to remember innermost. And then it says, this is the I am, right? And so for that, this is a leap, right? But for that, I have the burning bush from Exodus, because in Exodus, the word there is Abba, which is a very short word for a very long phrase, which means I am becoming that which I will become. Or I am becoming that which I shall become. And so I just got this fire to remember, this is the I am. That is deeper than name and form. So underneath the fire, there's digging going on in order to remember deeper. And name and form, at first I thought it was form and name, and then I know, no, it's name and form, which actually sounds better in English. So I just had a name tag go on top of the idea of form. I haven't yet come up with an image for form. Let's just check this and see how I'm doing here. This is not the ideal way to memorize, by the way. I wouldn't normally do this, but because I'm just demonstrating it. But this is the I am that is deeper than name and form. And your innermost self, innermost sense of self. In order to get that sense, what I did is, there's a Nirvana song called "The Senseless Apprentice," or it might just be called Senseless Apprentice. But anyway, it's based on the novel Das Parfum by Patrick Suskind, which is a German novel, which I've read in English and German, and I've heard the audiobook in German. Oh man, the narrator of that, it's just beautiful. But in any case, that's what I have there for sense of self, to make sure that it was sense of self. Because when I originally looked at it, I was like, your innermost self, but it's innermost sense of self. And then that clause of who you are. Now, it's the of who you are that I originally left out. And so I need to see the band The Who in there rocking out, right? So that innermost sense of self of who you are, right? And go from there back into whatever the rest of the quote is, which that innermost self of who you are. And then what was it? Oh, now I'm going to confuse myself here. Let me start from the beginning. So, when you lose touch with inner silence, you lose touch with yourself. When you lose touch with yourself, you lose yourself in the world. The innermost self of who you are is inseparable from stillness. I might be switching silence with stillness there. I can't track what I just said as easily as I could track what's in the book and memorize. But so the innermost sense of self of who you are is inseparable from stillness. It is the I am. It is the I am that is deeper than name and form. Let's have a look. This is so much fun. Let's see. When you lose touch with inner stillness, you lose touch with yourself. When you lose touch with yourself, you lose yourself in the world. It's important that it's in the world. I think that's a very good, important distinction. Your innermost sense of self, of who you are, is inseparable from stillness. This is the I am that is deeper than name and form. That inseparable from stillness, what I saw was a German waiter offering stilles Wasser, still water, or the other one, which is not coming to mind right now, but gas water, anyway. So that's how that works. And you don't have to get it right the first time. You just have to get it good enough that you come back and practice. And you just sit and you practice and you learn the techniques and you get it. So Sandra, I hope that answers your question. But the verbatim memorization is really, the struggle comes down to like these little clauses sometimes. And then is it that, or is it which, or what it might be in this or that case. And you've just got to work it. You've got to work it. What I find in general is that foreign language is way easier than mother tongue memorization. And one of the reasons for that, we know Ebbinghaus talked about in great detail, which is that nonsense is easier to memorize than actual meaningful stuff. And one of the reasons for that is that it really is so distinct from what you're used to. So familiarity, your mind would just filter out familiarity. And that's why in my memorization of Sanskrit and so forth, is I tend to wear out whatever it is that I memorized, which is why I'm glad there's so much of it to memorize, because then you can just add new stuff. And this relates to the challenge frustration curve. So whenever you are getting frustrated, you got to scale back to challenge. But you always want to make sure that you're being challenged, because if you're not being challenged, then you just get bored. And so this is why it's so great to have so much Sanskrit to memorize, because you could just add new stuff. And then what you do is you get into the wonderful challenges of volume of information. And then you go deeper and deeper into more memory palaces, longer memory palaces if you want to work with longer memory palaces, linking up multiple memory palaces, and so on. It's just so much fun. And it only gets ever to be a problem when you don't challenge yourself enough, because you'll stop growing if you don't challenge yourself. So I hope that that makes sense. And let me know if you have further questions. Robert says, I never met Gary Weber, but a good friend of mine who is a meditation instructor spent several years working with him, and I had a tremendous experience. That's great, Robert. Great to hear. Thanks for sharing that with me and with us. That's amazing. Fury6 says, thanks, I'm new to the channel, so I may lack knowledge of the correct terminology at times. No problemo. No problemas. Yeah, please get subscribed if you're not already. And if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world and if you have any questions about this. And I would highly recommend Fury6 that in order to get caught up with the lingo that we use, which, you know, is not changed just for fun and for laughs and giggles and all that sort of stuff, but it's changed because there's just so much terminology out there. Paradoxically, adding more terminology just adds more terminology. But by the same token, we can consolidate it, and I strongly believe in consolidating it so that it's much clearer. And since loci or loci, since people pronounce it so many different ways, and it's an ancient word and not a new one, I've decided that we need to move into the 21st century. And if we're in the magnetic memory world, we're talking about magnetic stations, and magnetic stations are different actually, because a memory palace is, or the place that you base a memory palace on, is more like a location as we understand it in modern English. A corner of a room is not really a location. It's a corner of a room. It's a stop. It's a station. But the house in which the room and in which the corner of the room is more like a location. That house is located on X street, right? So that's why I came up with things that way, because organization helps you with your habits. And so we just want better language and to consolidate it into a more structured form for all sorts of people. So I'll post there in the link for, or in the discussion for you, the link to the free course. If you haven't taken it, please do. It'll help you a great deal. Sandra says, thank you for the detailed explanation. It's always been a struggle for me to move from memorizing the concepts of a quote to the exact word order. This is a great help. I'm anxious to try. Great, great. We'll see if you can give it a try without any anxiety, even if you're anxious to try, because relaxation is a huge part of it. And what I like about doing some of this stuff live on these live streams is because it helps me train the relaxation part, because the stakes are high, right? And you don't want to. One doesn't want to come off as foolish, but then at the same time, that's what you need to do. You need to expose yourself to the chance that would happen, and it's really character building in some sense, even if you're reading Happiness Beyond Thought to annihilate your character or your ego. But in any case, this is just what happens in the life of someone who's using memory techniques. You will sometimes make the odd mistake, and the sooner that you get over it, the sooner that you just have it out in the open, the sooner that you'll actually build the skills to not have it happen. Or just to be able to deal with that. It's the same in mentalism. I don't know if anybody's a magician or practiced with mentalism and whatnot, but one of the best things you can do as a magician or a mentalist is to go out and make the biggest mistake possible in front of the biggest crowd possible, because that will train you to just be relaxed like never before. So I know this from experience, and it's a lot of fun. But anyway, back to, let's see here. We got a chat from Kyle. Thank you, Kyle. Hello, I'm going into med school and wanted to learn memory palaces. Should I buy the magnetic memory program first or watch all your YouTube videos and do the free 4-week program? Well, I don't know the answer to that directly, because if you're all in and you're already convinced that you want these skills and that's what you want to do, then I would say, why wait? But if you want to see if it's right for you, then definitely take the free training and just follow the exercises that are suggested there and apply them to what you're doing in medical school. Free is a bit of a trap sometimes, because it's going to cost you time, energy, attention, focus, and your application and your consistency. So when you just get the full training right away, what you're doing is you're buying a shortcut to just the deal, the actual training, and then the community and all of the things that are there, like in the FAQ section and so forth. And so you're just, I don't know what is the right thing for all people, but that is ultimately what ends up happening, is you have the curated multiple courses and you understand how it applies across the board to all things, and the FAQ section, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's really, really important to understand that that is ultimately what is going to happen is you just get to dive right in without without the whole roller coaster ride. You just go straight to the training, and there's the study guide in there to help you make decisions about how exactly to proceed through the masterclass. Given that you have a focus in medical studies, then that is going to obviously make things much clearer for you. So you'll definitely want to take the master plan part, and you'll want to probably go to the professional terminology video and then the foreign language video. Even though you're not studying a foreign language, medicine is a language, and there's going to be a lot of help from that. And verbatim would be good. So the course on poetry, which essentially means verbatim, would be great as well. And we just seen today, some examples of how that's done. And your success with it is going to be relative to how much you've unlocked your spatial memory and all the memory associated with that. So making sure that you're making memory palaces correctly and that you're making them a sufficient number, especially in medical school, is going to help unlock autobiographical memory. It's going to unlock what's called semantic memory and procedural memory and episodic memory in a way that you weave together all at once in order to be able to do this level of memorization as quickly as you want and you will need, and with all those demands on you as a medical student. So really, just whatever your preference is fine by me. But if you want to cut to the head of the line and just save all that time, by all means, that's available. If you go to the testimonials page, there's a video there. His name is Joe Riff, and he was in medical school. And let me look up that link for you, because I like to serve and to help people get shortcuts when they're available for you. Where is my testimonials page? We change the site around a lot. We do lots of fun stuff, but you can watch that video. Hope I memorized his name properly. Joe Riff, I believe, and he's a medical student, or he was at the time anyway. And he'll share with you his experience, and you can decide from there. But I'm pretty sure he went through the free course first. I actually don't know. I've never asked him what exactly his path was. But let's see. Yeah, that's his name, Joe Riff. Great name, great guy. So I'll pop that in the chat for you. It's on the testimonials page along with other videos that you can check out. And let me know how you proceed and what you decide. And if you have any questions, pop them in now or by email later. And that's how that goes. So Kyle says, okay, definitely going to check out the program. Thanks a lot. You're welcome, Kyle. I really appreciate your interest and your question. YX Bob. Wow. I don't know how to pronounce all of that name for you, YX Bob, but you say, Anthony, I heard about Guilo Camillo. Can we use his idea like our palace? If yes, then how can we use it? So that's a question for him. I don't know who he is, but the fact that I don't know who he is a bit of a sign that you may want to take into consideration. Oh, this guy. Yeah, okay. The Italian philosopher. I haven't looked into him very much. I thought maybe he was a living teacher. Yeah, well, look, I'll have to look into it more, but the theater of memory, the one thing that you need to consider, and it's a very important thing to consider, is that those guys are very, very good to study. And if you are able to read in Italian, then definitely read it in the original language. A huge amount of my success has gone from going back into the tradition, but I never went into his stuff in the tradition. I read Bruno. I read the book that's often attributed to Cicero, or the writing associated to Cicero, but is not really associated. We don't know for sure that it was from Cicero. So you can look into that. And Plato has stuff on memory that's sort of buried here and there in Plato. Aristotle has a very wonderful essay on memory. If you look at Thomas Aquinas, these are the guys that I learned a great deal from, and it's part of what has made everything easier for me, because so many of the memory training books out there are by contemporary memory competitors who train themselves to compete And what ends up happening is they forget all that information after very quickly after they've memorized it, and then they show people how they did it, and they're not necessarily doing PhDs or medical degrees or trying to become lawyers and so forth. Those techniques will help you accomplish those goals, but they're just not the same. So I'll have to look more into this, but really thank you for mentioning that name because it is not one that I'm very familiar with. But now that I see the images, I am familiar with this particular image, but I've never looked that much into it. The question is really, can you read that? Like, can you find anything in it? I'll have to look myself. Um, and this certainly is most likely covered in Yeats. So you might find some clues in Yeats, The Art of Memory, um, and Mary Carruthers may have covered some of his stuff. Uh, I would love to be able to read Bruno, but there's two really great translations of Bruno that would relate to this. So definitely, definitely everybody look that up and see if it's something for you to explore further. There's one thing that you'll find is that there's just endless amounts of stuff in the history, and it's well worth paying attention to. Well worth paying attention to. But it comes down to your practice. It comes down to your practice. All right, so back to the notion of practice. By the way, if you're joining us, hit that thumbs up, get subscribed to this channel if you're not already, and uh, let me know if you have any questions, any further questions. So, one of the other points here about practice comes up in Happiness Beyond Thought that I wanted to share, where Gary Weber says, "Indeed, there are few skills that do not require functional mastery before reaching the level at which the activity can become so automatic that something extraordinary or transcendent can occur. In something as prosaic as riding a bicycle, we start with a tricycle, graduate to a two-wheeler with training wheels before removing the training wheels, riding with one hand and then no hands. Why would enlightenment be a chance occurrence made no more likely through some preparation?" Which is the same thing with memory techniques. Like, why would you worry about having 50 to 100 to 200 memory palaces without just having mastered one, right? Now, at the same time, mastery of one comes through having a couple. And this is a thing Nelson Dellis talks about in his new book, Remember It, is that you want to have a couple. And so if you think about the first one as your training wheels or rather your tricycle, I never thought of the tricycle. I talk a lot about training wheels, but uh, if you think back even previous to the tricycle before you get onto the bike with training wheels, I think that's very, very appropriate. The first memory palace is not necessarily meant to be the memory palace that you then go on to use to master the world, because you'll need multiple memory palaces at the end of the day. And your first one, it's why I encourage people to not necessarily use their home, to consider their home, but to think of work, cafes, churches, movie theaters, and so forth. There's multiple things that you want to do, and nobody is in danger of ever making a mistake or making a memory palace unusable. But you do need to unlock multiple memory palaces in order to feel the effects and to get familiar with it. And Nelson agrees in Remember It, which I was very happy to see that. It's something that a lot of people are not getting as many results as they could otherwise if they would just make multiple memory palaces, because it's so helpful for the brain. And we know, and we saw in the previous quote, that brain structure changes. And it's very, very important to change the structure of your brain through this sort of graduation through the levels, through practice and through multiple things. So, you know, you might have gone to the store with your parents when you were a kid and they sat you on multiple tricycles to see which was the right size. Or you went to the bike store where you got the training wheels and you still had to sit on multiple bike seats and multiple bikes to see what was the right size. And there's a lot to bikes and memory palaces and memory techniques as such, because you will adjust. You have to put the seat up and down, you have to change the handlebars back and forth and so forth. This is just an ongoing process. I will, no matter how much planning I put into my Metro Reference Library Memory Palace, I'll still need to make some adjustments as I go through, and knowing how and when and what to do and why to do it is really, really important, because You want to be able to have the most efficient practice possible and the most efficient outcomes possible. And that's just something you learn by diving in and doing practice. So YX Bob says, I heard that he created a memory palace to stick many information inside. I thought that we can use those palaces or world museums that are available 360 videos. I wouldn't recommend that. I think you're looking for a path to frustration, although who knows? You have to try it and see for yourself. Some people may excel with that, but if you haven't seen it with your own eyes, then good luck. And can give you an example. I looked at the Sistine Chapel before that I ever visited it in person and tried to use one of these 360 things around there. It just doesn't work as nearly as well as after I went and visited the Sistine Chapel, and then it works great because I saw it with my own eyes. There's a chemical change that happens in the brain when you actually see things, and also there's emotions that I can draw upon. So I've been to Rome many times, but there's only one really strong memory of visiting the Sistine Chapel, and it was not on a very happy day. And so those emotions are helpful in using it because they can be tapped into. But I don't remember exactly when that I looked at the Sistine Chapel online or the 360-degree virtual tour. And that's a problem for using it successfully as a memory palace. I've done it with parks. I've done it with all kinds of Google Map stuff. It just never plays out nearly as well. Now, that said, Google Maps can be interesting to play around with if you're looking at a place that you have been to before and seen with your own eyes. So keep that in mind and consider that as part of your practice. But there's no really getting around, I don't think, and I don't find any memory people who tend to disagree, that you just want to have real memory palaces that you've seen with your own eyes. And the exception really is relative to your outcome and your goal and your practice and what it is you're trying to achieve. The other thing too, on the matter of practice, is I do a lot of live speaking and so forth, and I memorize the names of people. And one of the things that I sometimes do is poke around and do research on software and whatnot. And I was playing around with some memory training software, and I can do okay with the memory training software. But one of the problems there, and I was worried about it, having a retrograde effect in real life, because the skill in the software of memorizing the names of people in the virtual environment, first of all, it often shows names that no person who looks that way would ever have a name like that. And you know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, it's just like very, very unlikely for certain people with certain looks to have certain names. And why the software ever comes up with that, it's just so unrealistic. And yeah, it'll help improve your memory inside of that environment, but in real life, why even train yourself that way? Then the other thing is you have no spatial cues around the person to work with. You just have this very tight headshot. And the other thing is that you have this bizarre time constraint that you would never have in real life. So I was quite concerned about it, and I just ultimately, it didn't interfere at all with what I was doing in real life, but it's just not related to anything I would want to accomplish. I would not want my memory and the practice that I do focused on environments that I'm never actually in, or for goals that I never actually have. So just that's the end of that. But it is interesting to poke in every once in a while and to see how that I do and so forth. And there are certain leaderboards sometimes in these softwares and so forth, and most of them are competitors, and I guess that it does help them in the competition setting. I would think, though, that if I was going to go to competition, I would want to compete with the exact materials, or as close to those exact materials as I would face in the competition setting. So not cards on a digital screen, but actual cards that I will have in front of me in the actual environment. Not names displayed on a screen, but names on a piece of paper. And I'm sure that there's a software that could help give a bunch of random names that you could print out and have on paper. That's how I would practice. Now, in some sense, it's irrelevant how I would practice for competition because I don't compete and I'm not interested in it. But nonetheless, that's what I would do if I were in that situation. And the one time I did compete, I actually didn't do too bad. I was surprised myself, which is always a good thing. And I love being surprised by myself. All right. So YX Bob says, so would you recommend to visit huge parks and use it for a lot of information, or would it be very similar and messes up? YX Bob, you're asking me questions that only you can answer in your own practice. I just wouldn't recommend it. But it's dangerous to make that recommendation because I don't know you, we haven't talked, I don't know where you're at in the memory journey and so forth. So there's just a risk in answering general questions about people I don't know in general and vague ways. But you can answer that. You can answer it by going into parks and seeing how it works for you. I just wouldn't do that myself, and I wouldn't generally recommend it. But ultimately, the truth is, I don't know, and nobody does. But you can find out. And so it's a great mystery. You know, the hallmark of a mystery is that you're wondering what happened in the past and what will happen in the future. And so when you look to the past, you can find, and I gave a link here to the interview with Brad Zupp, and you can see, and there's another one with Phil Chambers, you can see that some people do use outside memory palaces and they don't seem to have an issue with it. But others do, and you can really consider all of that, and then you can go and see what will happen. And that's the beautiful enigma in life relative to your information. But if I was a student, I wouldn't spend any time, and I am a student, and I don't spend any time on outdoor memory palaces. The amount of time that I use outdoor palaces is very, very small. Now, if I wanted to practice at it, then I could, but it's just, there's not enough hooks. I use them for impromptu memory palaces above all, most of all. So that is pretty much that. I'm just going to answer a chat here over on the other computer and take a little break to pour some water. Thanks everybody for being here. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk about memory palaces and practicing. If you're just joining us live, hit that thumbs up. And I'm going to wet my whistle here a little bit with the Batman cup. Batman is a great symbol, by the way, for memory training and memory practice, because he's just a normal dude who does a lot of training, and he puts the right tools in his tool belt, right? And anybody could take the Batman mask, right? It doesn't have to be Bruce Wayne. It just has to be a person who's trained to have that level of skill and who knows the tools that need to go in the utility belt. It's a beautiful metaphor for what we're doing. Batman. Sorry, I just got to answer this. We're on alert here for something. There's storms where some people who are on the team live, and I just wanted to make sure they're okay and say that I acknowledged that I received the response. And that means we can go a little longer today, if we like. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat if you have questions, comments, and so forth, and any concerns about your memory practice. Let me know if you care to. Well, between 1 and 10, where would you say you are with your consistency and your practice? 1 would be never practice. 10 would be practice almost every day. We won't say every day because I don't think that that's even possible for any person, even though we use our memory every day. That much is so. The quality of which we use our memory is all suspect, but from 1 to 10, what would you say there is where you're at? I'd say I'm pretty much a 10, and I will type that in just to get us started and be curious what everybody has to say, if you care to self-identify with your number. And it's a very powerful thing to do. I'll say just let me know. Man, those storms in different parts of the world right now are quite interesting. I love live streams. It's so much fun. Are you all enjoying yourselves? I always love when the comments come after on the replays and some interesting questions come. So you can go revisit those. Sometimes they have some interesting discussions that show up. Not a single person. Oh, YX Bob is 5, maybe. Excellent. Well, 5, that's quite an accomplishment. That's halfway there. Great. Congratulations. Let's see if we hear from anybody else. Anyway, back to practice. So many good things in here. And really it just comes down to that everybody needs to practice, but how you're going to practice, whose practice you're going to emulate, and to what extent that you're going to get value from emulating their practice with some fantasy in your mind that you actually can be like another person is really, really important. And one of the things that is really interesting here is how that some people have rejected the idea of practice. Now, we don't see that in the memory world that much, although some people do sort of say strange things about practice and so forth. There's no blanket answer to how much you need to practice. You need to dive in and you need to actually do the practice in order to figure out how much you need to practice, and then never be too sure. Because it's this, what was it again? Shakan Taza. Shakan Taza is this metaphor of the samurai needing to always be prepared and aware of the situation and working to have the memory that you need in order to be prepared. I mean, it's expressed differently here, but it's very similar to what I got from Ghost Dog, which is this, be prepared like the samurai who, always has to execute one last move, even with his head cut off. I love that one. Suraj says, I use the practice rule you said in the recall rehearsal part of the masterclass. Excellent, Suraj. Thanks for letting us know. Thanks for being part of the masterclass. I really appreciate that. Recall rehearsal rules, the rules will set you free. But rules have wiggle room. Rules have personal adaptation. And there's no one size fits all. The student must tailor to the self. And there was an interesting email with a new masterclass student, and I was talking about how you need to meet the teacher halfway, but you also need to understand the 80-20 rule, which is that there's a lot to the 80-20 rule, but 80% of your results are going to come from your application, and only 20% of what a teacher says as you're along the journey is really ever going to be able to help you and guide you. So you need to be you need to be able to really focus on what you're doing in terms of meeting the teacher halfway, and then ultimately, you want to you want to exceed your own expectation of yourself. And the way you do that is by having some kind of goal, some kind of expectation. And in order for that to happen, you just need to sit down and think a little bit. So, you can have different kinds of goals. You can have very big, huge, hairy, snarly, over-the-top goals. And then you build the path that you're going to need to take in order to achieve that goal. Or you can have much smaller goals, which is the recommendation from James Clear that we talked about earlier. Start with a small habit, and then that would suggest starting with a small goal. Another sort of point that comes out in Happiness Beyond Thought and other things that I've read that seem to be really essential, like Jordan Peterson talks about this in Maps of Meaning, is that you kind of need to think about a goal that you're actually capable of accomplishing. So in your memory practice, you might think, okay, so I want to do X. Am I capable of doing that? Am I actually qualified for doing that? And then if you're not capable of it and you're not qualified to do it, then you need to pick a different goal. Like the goal might be whatever it takes to be capable or qualified to do something. So for example, if I wanted to become a doctor, well, I have a PhD, right? And I have 2 MA degrees, but I'm not qualified to be a medical doctor. So going and getting a PhD in astronomy would not qualify me for becoming a medical doctor, even though it's another PhD. I'd be like PhD times 2. It just doesn't work that way. I would need to think of the goal that would allow me to become a medical doctor. Now, there might be some special considerations that I'm able to capitalize on because of having a PhD. Like, for example, I might be able to skip directly to a particular program. Maybe, I don't know. But I'd have to go and look at that. And then I'd build the goal that would fulfill on a step-by-step basis, the qualifications that I would need in order to show up to be the doctor role. If you take it to memory practice, many people, they want to establish a certain level of skill, and really what they need to do is really master multiple memory palaces first, and then add on the major method, and then add on maybe they need to get a full PAO. But you can't, I don't think you can do a proper full PAO if you don't have the major method first, or the major system, as some people call it. And one of the fastest paths to making sure that you can get the major like that is to have a memory palace to help assist the creation of the major in your mind. And then you can go on to doing that full range of topics. Incidentally, I forgot to mention, and Sandra, if you're still here, this may help you, is that that quote is on page 3 of this book. And I used the image in my 00 to 99, which is Sal from Dog Day Afternoon, the movie with Al Pacino. That's not a character played by Al Pacino, but the other guy, Sal. And I used him. And on every quote that I memorize from this, I will use the character on the page number, which then means that I'll memorize both the page that the quote is on and the quote itself and use that figure to help. If you want that kind of level, so to speak, or you want that kind of skill, well, then you're going to need to do the preparatory work that will qualify you to be able to do that, which in this case is Memory Palace, Major Method, and a 00 to 99 built upon the major. And you could do an arbitrary 00 to 99 if you want. I wouldn't recommend it unless for some reason you're a competitor. But if you're a learner, then I would highly recommend it. And if you follow the competitor world and so forth, there's trends. People come back and forth to whether they want a major-based PAO or not and so forth. And it's really interesting to follow. There's benefits both ways. And as I understand it, Alex Mullen did what he did because his number system for cards, or his card system, which is premised on the major. So that's at least as I understand it. It's been a while since we talked about it, although we did talk about a week and a half ago. It just didn't come up exactly what his cards were, but when we did talk about it originally, that's how I remember it. In any case, qualifications matter, and if you create a big, huge, hairy, snarly goal, that's okay, so long as you have the qualifications to actually be able to accomplish it. And if you don't, then your goal needs to be the qualifications to accomplish that bigger thing first. And that's no big deal. I mean, that happens to us a lot of the time. And certainly there are things that I would need to learn. For example, I often think about what would be an app version of what I teach. And then I think of all the hassle and strain and whatnot of getting that done the way that I envision it. And then it's like, well, I have to learn coding. And then I think about how that Dave Farrow learned robotics, and I don't know the whole story, but at least that's what I've understood. And then I thought, well, yeah, it is possible. Could use the memory technique. If he can learn robotics with memory techniques, then I could learn coding in order to make the app that I think needs to be there. Or I can learn better business on entrepreneurship skills and then practice the craft and the art and science of delegation and project management, or hiring a project manager or whatever. The point being is that there are qualifications in order to get to that huge, snarly outcome, and I don't have them. I just don't have that level of coding skill, and I don't really have the level of project management skill in order to do that. Or there may be a middle way. I don't know. There might be some simple app builder that I could go and explore, and I would still have to be qualified in that and set little goals in terms of learning how to use such a software and go from there. And it's just outcomes, goals, milestones. Simple as that, and qualification. So really important. So Jaideep's here. Hello, Jaideep. Great to see you. YX Bob says, I just make my images dynamic, big, and kind of affect its environment. Is that all? Or how can we find our bizarre shapes? It's more than dynamic and big, but it's all relative to you and your practice and where you're at, and where you can find your bizarre shapes is through practice. I watch I have in the past, I'm not watching that many now, but lots of movies, used to read lots of novels and so forth. Just do regular examination of your past and think of association as a skill and practice that skill. Cards is a great way of doing that, especially when your cards are premised on a 00 to 99. You'll have lots of practice with that. So practice is very, very important for creativity. And there's some more research reported here in Happiness Beyond Thought about the need for extensive reshaping of the neural patterns and functioning of the brain. And what's another interesting point in here is he talks about how in the past, long before science came around to demonstrate neuroplasticity, people talked about how that they thought that their actual structure of their brain was changing. Um, and it's really fascinating that so many things that science does now actually was described thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. Um, and so I really find that quite interesting. Um, and you really just want to think and understand that what you're doing here is really integrating with the shapes of your brain and changing it. And you'll feel so different and feel so good because of how this is happening. Um, and also, so much of the things that we do in practice and so forth, they really help us develop a better relationship to ourself and the self within the self, the thing that is unchanging, and you become so much more aware of who you really are through this work, I think. So there's a really interesting description of what practice is and what it isn't. And I'd love to share that with you. So, Gary Weber often refers to Ramana, and one among Ramana's close followers, the one best known in the West, was H.W.L. Punja or Punjaji. His clear teaching and understanding of Ramana's work were a critical element in my journey, as in Gary Weber's journey. Few teachers have been so straightforward and direct in communicating their understanding. Punjaji said in the latter part of his life, "You do not have to practice any sadhana or spiritual preparation. However, few spiritual aspirants could match Punjaji's own intense sadhana." So listen to this. This is a guy who said you don't have to actually do any spiritual preparation or qualification. This is what he did, though. At one point, Pujaji would chant daily from 2:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. before going to work. After work, he would chant until he went to sleep. His standard practice was to do 50,000 recitations each day, synchronizing the chanting with his breathing. Pujaji did many forms of traditional worship, including reciting the names of the divine, as well as mantras and prayers with great fervor. Punjaji said that the turning point in his practice was when he realized from Ramana that he should have been asking the question, "Who am I all along?" So, all this chanting and all this sort of stuff, the question is, was it for nothing, right? And Gary Weber continues, even a realized master who reaches the point that practice is no longer necessary went through exhaustive preparation and practice. Without his preparation, would Punjaji have really understood the need for exploring the I? Were all of those hours of practice of no value in developing the concentration and detachment that allowed his transcendent understanding to emerge? And so this is a really important point because so many of us, we think that we've wasted our time on this or that thing that quote unquote didn't work. But all too often, when we thought we were spinning our wheels, that was actually what is making the thing that finally does succeed work. And so it's one of the reasons why in the magnetic memory method world, we always say, hey, look, one is a very dangerous number. You need multiple teachers. That's why I should invite people on the podcast to speak and teach about their stuff. And they may have books and they may have other trainings and so forth, because I know that one of the best things I can do for you is to introduce you to other teachers, because whatever you're doing now is setting the groundwork for your ability to even observe the knowledge in other training, right? And it works the other way around too. The best students, they have had been helped in the past and perhaps also quote unquote failed by other instructors, and maybe even they just couldn't read in those other instructors and other books and other courses what was being said there because they just simply hadn't had enough training. And so this is the way of the world. There's so many things where we need multiple touches from multiple teachers, multiple voices, and so on. And so often the success that you will get is attributed to something that deserves the attribution, but is only part of the mix. And this is just the way it is. And when you look at like great martial arts masters, they typically have had more than one teacher. It's not like they just landed on the martial art that was the one and did all the stuff for them, but they developed a reserve. And in memory work, we know this. There's something called memory reserve, and it's like this deep sediment that forms. And so you just need to keep reading the tradition. You need to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's again why I'm really excited by what I've opened up in a new tab here from YX Bob. to look deeper into that, because I'm always astonished by the things that I don't know and the perspectives that learning new things out there continually opens and will continue to open. And I want that same thing to be there for you. And the more I know about this wonderful tradition, the more I'm able to serve and and learn. And there's never really any failure whatsoever. The only failure comes from rejection and not really doing the best that one can to meet a teacher halfway. And a huge example of that is just following up on the books that are mentioned in this book, and never assuming that it ends, but at the same time being satisfied and at peace that you don't technically need to seek any further. So it's a paradox. It's an interesting paradox, because that's the kind of memory training I work to build too. Is the memory training where you won't need anything further, but by the same token, you will gladly and cheerfully go because you know that there's always more to learn, even if technically you just need to keep on doing the practice. But in this case, part of the practice is ongoing training, because memory training and memory practice is something that doesn't end. It is a skill. It's the same thing as piano. If you don't play piano for months and months and months, you're going to de-skill on the piano. If I don't pick up the guitar for weeks on end, I will de-skill. Never completely lose fluency on bass or guitar, but there is de-skilling. Same thing with German. I don't speak German nearly as much. I notice when I speak it that I've de-skilled. My reading is still quite strong, listening is quite strong, but my muscle memory in my mouth has de-skilled. Same thing with memory practice, spiritual practice, anything that you do, you will de-skill if you don't keep it up. So part of what these live streams are is just to come and inspire people to keep on practicing, because it's really powerful when you do. And it won't decay overnight if you take a week off or anything like that, but it will. It will decay, so you need to keep up with the practice. So Suraj says, I have some problems with some specific words like easy, fine, etc. I'm having problems encoding them with images. How to go about such kind of words? Okay, interesting question. So easy. What is your mother tongue, by the way, Suraj? I don't want to assume, but if we know your mother tongue, then we can maybe find some parallels there. Because that would be the first place that I would look, is, what sounds like easy or whatnot in your mother tongue. You could also think of other English words like easel, east. So the Wicked Witch of the East, for example. Maybe the Wicked Witch of the East is a bit too available, if you know what I mean. She's easy in a sense of partnering up without discernment with this or that person who may come along and ask for treats and favors. Same thing with fine. So fine, well, in the case of fine, you could think about what it rhymes with. Fine wine, for example, and then maybe the actor Ralph Fiennes. Maybe you can associate it with finding. You could think of other words, finally, right? Or fine can also mean a Gebühr in German, a charge. You could be charged, right? So you could think about maybe a police officer drinking a very fine wine and charging someone with the same crime. So he's drinking in public, and he is charging someone else for drinking in public. So things like that. So Suraj says Hindi. So is there anything like that, those sounds in Hindi? Let me know. And what are the letters that have the E sound and the F sound, if at all? We have an interesting podcast episode from a Magnetic Memory Method student who memorized the Hindi alphabet with the MMM. So if anybody wants to hear that walkthrough, it's really quite lovely. But I haven't memorized that alphabet myself. But those sounds may be missing from this or that language. But then you would just work more with English. Judging by your typing, your English seems fairly good. So that's great to see. But yeah, hope that helps you, and keep plucking at it. Suraj says nothing in particular I can remember now. Okay, good. But yeah, think of also So Easy E, he's a rapper, right? And there's probably, I don't know this for a fact, but I bet you there's a DJ named DJ Fine. There's probably some musician. So maybe go musician uh, and fine in Google. So Sesame Street, I am a fine musician, sings Oscar or Grover, I guess that is. No, that's Oscar the Grouch. Um, so there's a song, I am a fine musician. So in this case, Google could be your friend. Let's see, maybe we can listen to it. I'm a fine musician.
I practice every day, and people come from miles around just to hear me play. My trumpet, they love to hear my trumpet. Ta-ra-ta-ta-ra-ta-ta-ra-ta-ta-ta-ta.
Okay, so there's a goofy song there. That's a strategy for you. Suraj says, I can speak 3 languages very fluently. Excellent. Congratulations. That's amazing. Let us know what they are. I'm assuming that Hindi and English are the ones. The 2 of them. What's the third? Awesome, awesome. All right, so that was really what I wanted to share from Happiness Beyond Thought. I really am enjoying my second read through this book, and one of the things that I really encourage people to do is to read books multiple times and at least twice, because there's so much that you pick up on a second read. And there's a quote here from Ramana that says, "No one succeeds without effort. Mind control is not one's birthright. The successful few owe their success to their perseverance." And one of the ways you can persevere is go back to the well and look for more material that is in what it is that you learned from in the first place. Because there's probably about 80% of it that just completely flew over your head, or you've forgotten it, or you didn't pay attention to it enough in the first place. And that is, a tragedy, a tragedy. So keep that in mind and go back to the well, revisit it, fuel yourself from the training that originally helped you. Same thing with the masterclass, go back and go through it if you have it. Because there's not only are there updates, but chances are not everything got in the first time, and maybe not even the second time. There are audiobooks I've gone through 10 times, if not more, and I just keep going back to the well because there's always new things to discover, and it unlocks perspective. So Suraj says the third is a small tribal language onto a fourth language using your language method. It's really helping me. Oh, that's great to hear, Suraj. Thanks for letting me know that it's being helpful for you. And what is that tribal language? Let us know. YX Bob says there's a website called Rhyme Zone. It will find dictionary words but not specific nouns. Can it be helpful? Oh, well, I love Rhyme Zone. Rhyme Zone is a great website. Thanks for mentioning it. It does more than just finding rhymes. I don't know why you would say it doesn't find specific nouns, but I haven't been there for a while, so I'm not sure. But it does a lot. It also lets you find quotes and different things. But I seem to remember that it had parts of speech. Anyway, it's been a while since I used it, but thanks for mentioning it. RhymeZone is very, very helpful. But here's the thing, though. Even though, yeah, I went on here, Google, and found I'm a fine musician on the Sesame Street thing, and that can be useful, I wouldn't train yourself, and I never trained myself, to be reliant on the machines. What you need to be doing, and it's very important that you do, is you are training yourself to be reliant on yourself as much as possible because of that, what was it now? Shakan Taza, right? That metaphor where you want to be able to hit the target, right? Under any circumstance. You don't want to be like, oh my goodness, I just met all these people in a room. Where's rhymezone.com? You don't, and if you train yourself that way and you build up a dependence on it and a reliance on it to find your associations, that's not going to work. You're better off going into yourself and inquiring into yourself and developing that skill to speak within your own mind for associations, because that's the way you need it in the real world. And that's the stuff that you're going to end up memorizing better because of the primacy effect and the recency effect. But if you train yourself to need to delay, that you have an interstitial action, such as searching rhyme zone or whatever, then you're just going to cripple yourself. That's learned helplessness. It's learned dependence that leads to helplessness, and you would have done it to yourself. Rather, practice coming up with stuff independently. This is the very good thing that you need to be doing all the time, often, and training, ideally, nearly every day. So Suraj says it's called Manipuri, a small part of northeast India, and I'm learning now is Mizo. Oh, wow. Well, I hope to visit these regions one of these days. Sounds very exciting. I'd love to hear what it sounds like. Now I can search on Google. Speaking of searching Google, this is a dependence on Google that I think is very positive, as we can look things up like this. Suraj says, I tried coding as someone shaking my hands and saying he is fine, but it seems it doesn't work. Or I tried coding fine as someone shaking my hands and saying he's fine. Yeah, well, that's just, see, the problem there is that you're not hitting the representation centers. So I would suggest you look up an actor like Ralph Fiennes. Let me see if I can find you the link, because his name is spelt unusually. Some people would pronounce it Fiennes, but I believe it's pronounced Fiennes. Actually, I believe it's technically called Rafe Fiennes, but Ralph is what it usually comes out of. And I would watch some clips with him and maybe watch a whole movie with him. He's in many good movies. One that I really love is called Spider by the Canadian director David Cronenberg. And it's really weird and strange. He's also in one of the James Bond movies. I think he took over the role of M. And he's just a really memorable figure. I also saw him on stage in New York. What was that play called? It was a Faith Healer, it was called. And that was a play that I had read in university. And when I lived in New York, I was so excited, not only because it had this actor who I really admire and find so interesting, but also because I'd read it in university. And it was just amazing to go and see him live. And it's a long soliloquy, but it's three, actually, with three different characters. In any case, he's very prominent in my mind, and I believe the correct pronunciation is Fiennes. Yeah, Rafe Fiennes. It even has it right there in the wiki page that I just shared with you. And so that could help you. Now, why is that better than just the abstract idea of someone shaking my hand and saying he is fine? Well, part of it is it's just not, it's not giving you a sense of an actual person. So already some guy named Fiennes is better. Now, if you also have him with like dipping or spilling fine wine over your hands while you're shaking, and you come to learn that fine wine is a way of explaining that wine is very, very good or very expensive, then that's going to give you an extra level of association, an extra level of connection. If you also, somehow integrate the meaning of the word fine as in a punishment for parking incorrectly or drinking in public or whatever, then, you could have him dressed as a cop. Now he's slapping handcuffs on you, and this guy named Ralph Fiennes is giving you a fine, and you're able to weave together multiple meanings of the word in the same place. And I would just really think in Manipuri or Mizo and in Hindi, if you're able to just think of similar sounding words, those could help you as well. So dive into that. I think that you'll find that pretty useful. All right, so let's dive into some mailbag here. Matt is asking if the masterclass is digital or physical. It is 100% digital. Thank you for that question. And by the way, I forgot in all the excitement today to mention that we are testing now, and it's ready for testing by you. We are testing a new forum. So if you go to magneticmerrymethod.com/forum or memory-improvement-forum, you should be able to create yourself a little account and start to get involved in the conversation there. and I will post that link in the chat for you. And we're still weeding out a few little bugs here and there, but it's looking really good. And so far, getting some really interesting discussions going on, and really enjoying it a great deal in order to help more people. So Suraj says, thanks a lot. Thank you. And there's the form. Now, there are still some bugs, so if you experience any issues, please do let me know. And I can tag the people, the wonderful people on the team who are supporting us and our initiatives to help out and help us figure out whatever the heck might be going wrong there. And wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All good. All right, so I'm going to start tidying up here, and if you want to ask any last questions, then let me know, and I will do a couple mailbags, but this is for you while you guys are all here live. YX Bob says, I saw Yanja Wintersoul memorize many pictures in a very short period of time. I've never crossed some kind of technique. How does it work? Well, I don't know what kind of pictures, and I don't know who Yanja Wintersoul is, but that would be a discipline, certainly in the memory competitions, some of them. And, oh yes, Yanja, the Mongolian champion, Mongolian Swedish. So you'd have to ask her. I always encourage you to ask the people who do the things that you're talking about, because they're the ones who are able to answer that. Myself would be speculation. Memorizing pictures, though, from my perspective, would be first, do I have a reason to memorize pictures? Do I have a reason to memorize abstract images and so forth? When the answer is no, then I don't pick up that practice. However, there is still something interesting to be explored there, and it does come up in competition. So I would ask that question to competitors, because they are the ones who work on developing that skill. They show up to that practice. So if that sounds good, then definitely be in touch. And I have to memorize some new names here because you're mentioning people who I have seen before, but I never memorized their names. Got my work cut out for me. But yeah, I've seen some cool videos. She was doing videos for IKEA. I remember that, and that of course is really interesting. The videos that she did for IKEA, so check those out. Very interesting. YX Bob says, "How can I catch her?" I don't know, man. Google. As I just said, I never memorized her name, so I don't know. I've never been in touch with her. Although I wouldn't mind having her on the podcast at some point. But as you know, Magnetic Memory Method Project is not really about competition. So I highly recommend people who are interested in competition to be in the competition world. There is a thriving community all about that, many communities all around the world, and they're just be very, very interested in having another person be involved. So if you're interested in competition level techniques, that's just something that's waiting for you at any given moment that you want to dive in, and Google is your friend for that, for sure. But if you don't have Google, let us know. Maybe somebody can help you out in that regard. Let's see. Philip writes here, my biggest struggle is putting it all together. You are helping with that, and I'm going through how to memorize numbers. Oh, that's great, Philip. So thank you for letting me know. I love when people just send a quick note to let me know where they're at with their projects, and it's just a wonderful thing that that in 2018 people are showing up to improve their memory and to study these techniques and apply them and apply them to large learning projects, which is what we focus on. Emmanuel says, I cannot remember many of the fundamental aerodynamic equations that I learned in college. All right, so that's stuff that was learned previously, and now one needs to go back and find that source information and then memorize it with memory techniques. And having the memory palace in play, and in this case the major for sure, would be the thing you'd want to do, because there's going to be a lot of numbers in those equations. So definitely some training for that. Thanks for letting me know, Emmanuel. And YX Bob says, I'm a student, so I haven't enough time for competitions. Do I have to practice poem memorizing, card, and binary system? Yeah, no. Well, if you're a student, then practice with the information that you need to memorize as a student. And poetry would probably be the most likely thing there for you as a practice that would build up the skills that you need to become a student. So why do I say that? Well, because poetry is verbatim, as we were talking about earlier today, and me just demonstrating some things that I memorized this morning verbatim, and you could see some of the issues there, some of the challenges that may come up or may not come up. So what is it that you're studying in school, and how can you get started with memory training based on memory palaces? If you need the major, make sure you pick that up so you can memorize numbers, and go from there. I don't think that cards will hurt, but it's not necessarily where to start. I personally think that one needs to start exactly where that you are going to get the biggest bang for your buck. And one of the reasons why is that we rely in life on dopamine spikes. That's why the internet manipulates us so well and has challenged our discipline and our attention span. But it was not as if it's new. We've always needed some kind of, what they call a quick victory. And so if you are struggling with something in school, and you know that tomorrow your day at school would be 100 times more successful if you just had that one thing in memory, whether it's an equation or whatever, start with that. It might not be the most sexy thing in the world. It might not be the most thing that you're just jazzed up about and, oh yeah, I'm super excited to memorize that. But if it will improve your life, then it will be the thing that creates this little flash in your mind that inspires you to keep going forward with the techniques. And so I would just figure that out. Sandra says, these live chats give me so much beyond motivation. I find new books and individuals to check out and new tools from your answers to questions. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Sandra, for your kind words and letting me know. Really appreciate you always being here and interactive. One of the things that's so obvious when we're talking about brain plasticity and learning and growing and so forth, we know that a part of the people will never participate and so forth, but often they're the ones that need to get participating because it'll open your perspective. It's like swimming. If you're just reading books about swimming, or you're just watching other swimmers and you never get in the pool and move around, then you're never going to unlock those parts of the brain that get you in there. Now, I don't personally need you to get involved in the discussion, but you might want to consider getting involved in the discussion. And if you are like many people in those classrooms, when the teacher says, hey, do you have any questions? And you do, but you don't even raise your hand or you don't type a thing, well, the only person that's getting hurt there is you. So you may want to consider that. And I just noticed that, or at least I would speculate that the benefit that Sandra is mentioning here in her chat that she just posted comes not just from having been passively listening, but engaged in the discussion, because your attention opens and you're more observant when you're involved. So I would highly recommend getting more involved if that's right for you. And if it's not right for you now, plant the seed for it being right in the future. I was a reluctant student myself. I know what it's like to be the guy sitting there not engaging, although I wish that I had more and more often. Because it would have helped me a lot, especially with the anxiety and the depression that I went through in university, and often hanging out with the wrong crowd because I didn't get to meet the people who would have been a lot better for me to be around. And so that just brings us back to the James Clear point about finding your tribe, finding your people. Ragwendra says, you are awesome. Well, thank you for that. Really appreciate that. Thank you for taking a minute to type that out. I appreciate it very much. Um, YX Bob says, when will you be live in the future? Can we be warned a couple days before from Twitter or Facebook? When it comes to YouTube, no, we don't do any, or rarely any pre warning. But if you want to have information about when certain things are coming out, then you'll want to register for the free course at magneticmarymethod.com, and you'll be notified of different different opportunities. And we are working towards having scheduled sessions inside the masterclass. It's very complex. If you've been around this community for any amount of time, you've seen some of the struggles that one has when I do these live streams, and often the connection drops, and we don't know if it's the building, we don't know if it's something with the internet. We know that there was a lot of people over the last 2 weeks who had huge amounts of trouble with streaming. So it wasn't just me. As Sandra knows, if I get on my iPhone to just do a spontaneous one, all these things appear backwards. But when everything is working and the stream is strong, and we can use this particular software, it can work. But scheduling is very dangerous because we don't know what's going to happen with the internet, and we're working to figure out a way that will work. And also the scheduling. If you're on my email list, when I have webinars, you will receive a notification of that, and those are all meticulously and deliberately timed. So make sure you're on my email list. Twitter and Facebook, I do use them just simply because we gotta meet the world. Actually, there's very little free will in the world. I don't know exactly why I use them. They're the most least likely places to do any serious study, but we do have a presence there. But they're really not of much great interest to me. Um, so you may catch some notes there, but the best thing is to be on the email list and checking email. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, same principle goes. You'll be notified by YouTube when we go live if you're subscribed to this channel. Let's do a little bit more mailbag, and looks like everything is good with the team members here. Yes, that should be fine. Talk to then. And I'm going to just poke around in the mailbag here a little bit longer. If you have any further questions, feel free to pop them in the chat there. And email is still the best real way to get in touch with me, which is Anthony@magneticmarymethod.com. And going to the site, of course, you'll find very, very useful. It's open 24/7, and I really look forward to seeing you over there. If you want to get involved in the discussions, there's lots of discussions. Also, YX Bob, I suggest you register for the forum, which is new, and really excited about it. Just starting to let people know about it, and there may be a way to notify people through that of live streams. But at the end of the day, I like to do these YouTube live streams spontaneously. They're just a public service to get in touch with people who are interested in memory improvement. So Michael says, my biggest frustration is that I never found a way to really develop the techniques and make them second nature. I could be doing so much more with what I already know, but I hit a wall somewhere along the way with how to bring it all together, to keep it all going, etc. And I pretty much left most of the techniques behind, because even with the techniques, it can still take a vast amount of time to really keep up with what you want to learn and retain. So I think the price for your comprehensive course that gets more deeply into these issues is a small investment to make. Yeah, it is actually. So I want to ask you, he says, my mom had a stroke back in May. She is steadily recovering and is expected to slowly make a recovery. At the moment, the right side of her body is strong, but the left side has a ways to go. The stroke damaged parts of the parietal and temporal lobes on the right side of the brain. She is very good with recognizing family and friends that come to visit, and thankfully she has been lovely to the nurses, therapists, and everyone else, very kind and loving. She also makes some funny, ironic humor comments from time to time when she is fully lucid. However, she is not yet at a point where she is retaining information about what has actually happened to her. From conversations we've had with the neurologist, we expect this will all improve. All that is to ask, are you aware of specific approaches and memory exercises to help stroke victims, perhaps even ones that can be used right now despite her very limited bandwidth at the moment? Thank you for your help. I look forward to diving into your materials and working with you. Take care, Michael. Well, Michael, thank you for that. And here's the thing. First of all, I just don't know. Medical proviso. I'm not a medical professional, but I do know some things about this. And so you'd want to run them past a proper medical professional. But there is something called passive memory training. And passive memory training is something that you'll want to do some research on. And essentially, what they would do is show the person in question, and this is something you could do to yourself for some memory training. It's very, very good. But you'd show, say, 10 words on 10 cards, and then you come back an hour later and say, did you see this word an hour ago? Yes or no? That's it. You just keep track of what they saw. And the literature that I've read suggests that just doing that consistently, I don't know the exact patterns that they might use. It would be different for the individual, obviously. The state they're in, you don't want to overwhelm people depending where they're at post-stroke or post-brain trauma. But going and doing that has apparently shown memory improvement recovery. So this is something that is on an episode of the podcast related to brain trauma with Michael Gussman was his name. And that's an interesting episode to listen to, which we can share in the link here because I think you'll find it useful. We can share the link with you. Magnetic memory. Let's see if it comes up. See if I remembered his name better, correctly. Yes, I did. Always good to remember your name, the name of people who've been on your show. Always good. I love memory. So here you go. Listen to that episode, and I will answer that further later. But really great when people are expansive in email. It's nothing is more difficult to deal with than when someone emails and says, how to remember physics. And I mean, I'm not meaning to make a joke of anything, but that's kind of like so far from specific. There's just nothing to work with there. And consider that if you're considering asking a question like that. And one of the things we did on the forum is we created a little guide, very brief guide on how to ask a question, because it's really important to getting results. You've got to meet your teacher halfway and be part of the process by being very specific about what it is, and even trying to answer the question on your own first is a great thing to do. All right, so Surinder says, I am learning conversational English and need to pick up the conversational vocabulary and boost my fluency. Great. Well, all that you need to do for that is to work on memorizing words and then work on memorizing phrases around those words and then carry on from there. It's just that simple. So an amazing adventure awaits you just by doing that process alone. All right, everybody. That was a great session today. Thanks, everybody, for being here. If you have any further questions, you can always come and use the forum, ideally. And Sindhu is here. Great. Thanks for being here, Sindhu. We are now closing up, but as I go through my little end notes, feel free to post any questions you may have. But we had so many interesting characters and ideas show up today that you can all benefit from. If you care to go back and scan through the replay, I'm sure you'll notice some gems. I really hope that you'll pick up some memory practice. Read this book, Happiness Beyond Thought. It's got great message about the importance of practice, developing practice so that you can develop the qualifications for whatever it is you want to accomplish, whether it's memory or meditation or anything like this, in order to make sure that you are getting somewhere, moving forward in your life, and that you're you're actually on the path, and moving forward and understanding that the path requires practice, needs practice. There is really no getting around the foundational need to show up and to be consistent and to study the techniques, implement the techniques, and practice the techniques over time and consistently, so that you're able to actually experience the levels of your memory that serve the goals that you have, and to have goals. Oh, Barry's here. Great to see you, Barry. Thanks for saying hello. Not late at all, just in time. Even though we're winding up, but if you have any things to say, we can stick around a little bit longer for Barry. Always good to see Barry. We were talking today about a number of things that I discovered in Happiness Beyond Thought related to practice that I think you'll find really useful and helpful. And we were able to extend and really dive deep into the notion of practice and how important it is. And I know you're a good practitioner of these skills, and had a great time. One of the most precious things is the practice of teaching these skills, and I really appreciate your attention and your participation as I practice doing live streams, because it is a wild and strange and wonderful world of technology that I, would never have imagined having to learn the skills of needing to do this. And I know there are little slips and mistakes and things that are not ideal, but if we don't have an audience to show up to and to practice it, then never get better at it. And so one of the most important things that I'm grateful for is for everyone who is a participant in these sessions and takes this tradition seriously and supports this work, because I believe it is the most important work that there is, because we all are touched by memory. And it's very sad to me that there are some strange and ugly things that happen in the memory world where people put out magical potions that are supposed to help your brain, and we get slogged with spam all the time at my site from people pitching poisonous pills that there's no scientific evidence in the world will help, but they're preying on people and they have really good marketing, and it's really sad. So one of the things that you're doing by being here and helping is helping spread the word about what really works, which is just sitting down and learning some ancient memory techniques that have been with us for many, many years, long millennia. And I really appreciate everybody who's part of it. And it means more to me than I can express in words. So Barry says, on your advice, I just received Tony Buzan's Mind Map Mastery book. Very excited about it. Oh, and as you should be. Well, great. Thanks for following up on that recommendation. And I'm glad I stuck around a little bit, because I want to post the link to my full review of that, and ask all of you who have been so helpful if you would help Tony Buzan by leaving a comment on this page and sharing this around. Because for some reason, the technology wasn't working properly, and a lot of the shares that came in didn't show up on those little counters, and in the worldly ways of the world, those numbers matter, perhaps more than they should, but they do. And so we would appreciate very much if you would help spread the word about Tony's new book, as I tried to do, and get involved in the discussion there. I think it's one of the most important books ever, and you'll see by the depth that I go into explaining how important that book is. And it's been very, very helpful for these live streams to unlock many ideas about memory for you by mind mapping some of the things that I've wanted to say. And I'd really appreciate if you would support his book, because Mind Map Mastery is such a phenomenal, wonderful, powerful book, and you get to see on that review some of the ways that I've applied it and improved my techniques a great deal. And Tony himself, very nice of him to do so, but he gave his thumbs up to the review, so that's great. And so when you're there, click the share buttons, which are like the thumbs up, and leave a comment. That helps tell Google that you care about this stuff. And when Google knows, then Google shows, to put it simply. So that's really great, Barry, and I look forward to hearing how you find it and seeing some of your mind maps. And then, of course, in the masterclass in the FAQ, there's the can't miss formula, which you can use for mind mapping and memory palaces together. And that is a very, very powerful combination indeed. All right. So thanks, everybody. And I hope, Barry, you'll be able to make some sense out of the replay if you care to watch it. We did do something that is very easily summarized by study the techniques, implement the techniques, and practice the techniques, but do so in a way that is kind of samurai in nature. So shikantaza was the operative word there, from page 5 of Happiness Beyond Thought, if memory serves. And also the practice of finding stillness will be very useful, because one of the things that happens is people get frustrated when things don't work. And if you can just be in a line with calm and quiet inside, then you'll be able to just zoom towards magnetic memory. Barry says, every week your advice is helping me. Just finished a short business presentation without notes and wowed my peers. Thank you. Great to hear, Barry. I really appreciate you letting me know. And of course, you already have let me know by email, and I'll always appreciate any updates you're able to give. And just keep going, because it's just the beginning of this amazing adventure. And the more you practice, the more amazing and profound and fun and edifying and elucidating and enlightening it becomes, to just be able to look at information, encode it into your mind, and have it as if it was your own, because it really is in your brain. It's become part of your neurochemistry and has changed the shape of your brain, changed the chemical concepts at that contents at that deep of a level. And I'm so glad to hear that it's helped you. And we will do all that we can to be here next week again on a live stream, perhaps around about this time. And you never know, we do spontaneous ones here and there. And we got a new video we're just going through the editing of now. And I always just got to say a shout out to Ali. Her editing of the videos is just great, getting so much more success for this channel. And so the last thing I will say is, if you haven't hit that thumbs up yet, what Google knows, Google shows. And if you care about this tradition, make sure that you give this a thumbs up and share it around. And we will be back to share more from the tradition again, and educate and elucidate and enlighten and inspire. So thanks, everybody, for being here today. And until we speak again, come visit me at magneticmemorymethod.com, and we'll see you soon. Take care and keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.